So the declaration of a state of emergency in Rivers State continues to reverberate politically across Nigeria. Well, now it'll likely be settled in the Supreme Court as the governors from the main opposition PDP legally challenge the imposition. So justices will now hear their complaints that imposing a state of emergency in Rivers State violates the Nigerian constitution. Members of the Ijo youth movement have also asked the ECOWAS Community Court of Justice to set aside the suspension of elected officials and the removal of democratic structures and institutions in Rivers State by the Tinubu government. Both the popular Kwankwasia movement in Kano and its mentor, the former NNPP presidential candidate and former governor Rabiu Kwankwaso, have described the state of emergency as illegal and unconstitutional. And more than 300 civil society organizations have added their powerful voices, saying the move is not only unconstitutional but anti-constitutional, an abuse of the presidential prerogative. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by Anthony Ubani, who is the Executive Director of Fix Politics and spokesman of the more than 300 civil society groups that have come together to question the legality of President Tinubu's decision. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Charles.
I wanted to explore a particular phrase that came up in your declaration on behalf of the more than 300 civil society groups of opposition to the state of emergency. You said it was not only unconstitutional but anti-constitutional. What did you mean by that?
Clearly, it is unconstitutional, but it's also against the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. When you look at the issues, why do you have all this furore? Past presidents have spoken. President Jonathan, President Obasanjo, former Senate presidents have spoken. Nwabura has spoken. You've just listed a number of former governors, incumbent, that have spoken. You've made the point that the opposition party, PDP, has gone to court. What is it about this that has created such excitement in the country? Negative excitement, if I must emphasize. There are two key issues specifically that has created all this furore in the country, needless furore. One, the unconstitutional nature of the state of emergency. The 1999 Constitution, as amended, of the Federal Republic of Nigeria states very clearly the conditions that have to exist for a president to authorize a state of emergency. The NBA president, which is the largest body of lawyers in this
Nigerian
country,
Bar Association.
that's right, has come out clearly and made it clear in no ambiguous terms that those conditions were not met, and made it also clear that the declaration is unconstitutional. Secondly, the suspension of a duly elected governor of a state, the suspension of a duly elected State House of Assembly is an overreach, an executive overreach by the president. There is nowhere, directly or indirectly, where the Constitution says that his president can suspend an elected governor, an elected House of Assembly. So, I mean, when you see this kind of situation, what the signal and the optics of it is very clear. If we allow this to go, then the political class will be emboldened. What's going to happen tomorrow? Perhaps the president wakes up and suspends 24 governors and 24 House of Assembly and anoint some military administrators to take over. We might as well go back to military rule and know that we are back in military rule.
Now, one of your CSO collegiate groups, SERAP, has taken the Tinubu government to court over the state of emergency. There's a lot of talk about, whether it's going to be taken out on sort of technicalities. Are you optimistic that you'll get a fair day in court and that the court will take your argument seriously?
We are very optimistic. We did make the point, if you listen to our statement at the press briefing, that we now expect that there will be multiple court cases, multiple litigations. And we did call on the judiciary to ensure that these cases are attended to on their merit and not on technicalities. This is a constitutional issue. Take note that in the history of our democracy, no sitting president has removed a sitting governor of an opposition party by whatever means, whether by state of emergency or whatever you want to call it. So this is the first time this is happening, that a sitting president of another party goes to a state governed by another party and removes an opposition governor. This is very, very dangerous for our democracy. If the president is not called to order, the National Assembly called to order, and this decision is reversed.
Many Nigerians keep in the back of their minds the possibility, indeed probability, as some would argue, that legal pathways may not necessarily correct this move. What are you most afraid of now?
What you've just stated clearly is a legitimate fear for us to have, given the past behavior of the judiciary, with some of the very curious rulings we've had from the judiciary. But we believe that based on precedents, this is not the first time we are having a state of emergency in Nigeria. The judiciary has ruled severally on this matter. So there are precedents in this matter. It will be difficult to see how the judiciary will invent, and I use that word deliberately, a ruling that will sustain this state of emergency. Because for you to come up with a ruling that will sustain it means you are throwing the Constitution away. Section 305 has zero ambiguity. Zero ambiguity. It's very clear. Section 188 is also equally clear. How you can remove an elected governor, how you can remove an elected House of Assembly. So I don't know, maybe they want to reinvent the 1999 Constitution, or what magic they are going to do to be able to sustain this state of emergency.
Given the clarity
right
of that Section 305 and the clarity with which you articulate the issues around that Section 305, what do you think this emergency rule move is all about? Do you agree with the opposition who say that this appears to be an attempt to take over the structures of an important swing state ahead of 2027? I mean, they're calling it a political coup.
Exactly. We did call it the same thing. We called it an executive coup. It is a coup, clearly, because anytime you dismantle democratically elected governments, it is a coup. It is a coup. When the military does it, we call it a coup. If a democratic president does it, it still is a coup. The point is clear. And I believe if you listen to all of the commentary across the nation, whether former presidents, whether public opinion leaders, whether ordinary citizens, whether partisans, it is clear that this has nothing to do with the well-being of citizens. It has nothing to do with the well-being of democracy, of the polity of Nigeria. This clearly, it's about 2027 politics. It is dirty politics leading to 2027.
So given all that, I mean, how big a political moment is this then for Nigeria?
It is huge. It is huge. It is huge. And that's why citizens are rising up. That's why civil society is rising up, because we're not going to allow this to stand. It's unprecedented in our democracy that a president will overreach in this particular manner. Clearly, if you follow what has been happening in the polity, you can see that there's a falling out of the president with some of his initial supporters, particularly from the northern side. Right now, nobody is even sure what is happening between the president and his vice president, if they're even on talking terms. If you follow the news reports that you journalists put out, it appears that the North is not very happy with the president. What did the president win the 2023 election with? The lowest margin you've had in the history of Nigeria. Approximately about 8 million votes. Didn't even get to 2 digits. He lost Lagos, lost all the major capitals of Nigeria. And his bulldog, Wike, managed to give him...
Nyesom Wike,
yes,
the minister of Abuja.
Who was then governor, managed to give him River State. Although every reasonable Nigeria believes they lost that state. And so clearly, if you look at it from a political point of view, the permutations are very clear. We probably are not going to do so well in some of the northern states that we did well in 2023. We probably also might not do so well in some of the other southern states we did. Except by some miracle, you get this economy pumping, doing so well by 2027, which I know is not going to happen. And even if it was on its way to happening, this whole confusion created by the state of emergency have brought distrust in the system. So what's the point now? What do they have to do? It is clear to them that if they lose Rivers, there's no calculation through which he can stay as president. If he loses Rivers
That's
State,
an important swing state, isn't it?
Very important swing state with huge votes. So if he loses Rivers, it's over. Because it's very clear right now that he is not going to get the same quality of votes he got from the North come 2027. It becomes critical that a southern state like Rivers State should be consolidated, to use the language of the politicians, by all means. It's a do or die affair. So we must keep Rivers State within the APC.
So as the country drifts more towards this alleged authoritarianism, in your assessment, what does that tell you about the democratic environment heading towards 2027? Is your expectation, given all these things that you talked about, that that election will not be free and fair?
It is yet to be seen. First, let me say that we have been encouraged recently by two bills that have passed second reading in the National Assembly: the early voting bill and the diaspora bill. These are bills that, if they do pass, and we believe they will pass, will increase the space for citizens to vote, make it easier for citizens to vote, bring in more people, and anything that enlarges the democratic space is good for democracy.
Yeah, but some would argue that they can't even, I mean, INEC has enormous difficulty managing the votes within Nigeria. What more when it's sort of in another country altogether?
Yes, you have a point there, but don't forget the early voting bill has nothing to do with the diaspora bill. That will allow a whole lot of people, particularly first responders and other workers, to be able to vote before the election per se. So basically it's going to increase the pool, and that is very, very important. But coming back to your question specifically, I think that it's impossible for any objective, honest, and fair analyst to postulate that the elections are going to be free and fair. We've not had free and fair elections since the beginning of this republic. So I don't have any logical basis, I don't have any facts, I don't have any evidence on the table to suggest that by some magic 2027 is going to be free and fair. But it is the hope and expectation of civil society that will continue to push, continue to encourage the political class to lower the temperature and allow this democracy that so many died for
Is there
to
a
work.
way to strengthen the independence of the Electoral Commission?
There are so many ways to do it. There are so many ways to do it. But the point, the critical point here is, will the political class do what is needful for the electoral management body to be independent? They won't. They won't allow the judiciary to be independent. They won't allow the police to be independent. They won't allow the electoral management body to be independent, because those are the institutions that they capture and compromise in order to stay in power. So that's where we are in Nigeria. Everyone knows that's the truth. That's where we are.
Well,
but we'll continue to push, to advocate, and to work with relevant stakeholders to see how we can get change and reform happen in Nigeria. But let me just chip this in. There's so much talk about 2027 election, but I would dare say that the biggest challenge we have in Nigeria is not the elections, it's the constitution. This same constitution that the president has just thrown in the dustbin and acted very irresponsibly. Until we have the courage, the conviction, and the character to move forward, particularly through the National Assembly, to have a change of constitution. Mark my words, not an amendment of the constitution, but a change of the constitution. It's difficult to see any scenario how this country will move forward.
But some would argue that it is much more important, perhaps more fundamental, to have a root and branch reform within the political class, because I mean the constitution as you have it, you've talked about how ineluctably clear section 305 is, and yet people have gone and done whatever they want to do. So I mean the constitution is just a document.
It is a document.
It's about how you interpret that document and implement that document, isn't it?
I agree with you, but you see, the constitution is the ground norm. This is what defines how we live together as a people. This is what defines how we function. This is what supports our democratic arrangement. Now, if you look at the Constitution, that's really a conversation for some other day. But if you look at the Constitution, it is flawed in so many ways that you can't begin to think. I mean, why do you think every year, once a new government comes in, the National Assembly sets up this constitutional review panel, they will take one or two pieces here and there, amend it. How long are you going to do that? 20 years, 40 years, 60 years? The Constitution is fatally flawed. Corruption in Nigeria is supported by the Constitution. Ethnic divisions in Nigeria is supported by the Constitution. Religious divisions is supported by the Constitution. There is hardly anything wrong with Nigeria that the Constitution does not tacitly or directly support.
Or at least ambiguously.
That's right. You need a constitution that the people can say, yes, we the people have put together this constitution for ourselves. And that is not what it is.
Yeah.
No Nigerian owns that constitution. No Nigerian believes in that constitution.
As you said, that is a whole program.
Right.
That constitutional review, but very important, and it brings up other issues such as, restructuring and all the rest of it. But let me return to the issue under discussion, which is Rivers State and the imposition of the state of emergency there. Let me turn the clock to 6 months from now, when hopefully the state of emergency has come to an end. What do you see then in terms of a political wellness check for Rivers State?
If there's going to be peace in Rivers State, if there's going to use your own phrase, political wellness, a number of things will have to happen. The president will have to demonstrate ethical and transformational leadership. In demonstrating that kind of leadership, it means he must be objective and not take sides, not be a partisan in Rivers State. Clearly, from everything that has happened from 2023 to date, the president is partisan in Rivers State. Number two, in following up with what I have said, he has to call the Minister of FCT to order. He has to call him to order. The Minister of FCT is the only official. He has the constitutional right to fire. And guess what? He has not done that. The governor, who he has no constitutional ground to fire, is who he has fired.
Well, he's suspended.
Or he's suspended. So one, he must call the minister to order, because there's no analysis. There's no way you look at the crisis in Rivers State that it does not begin and end with the name Nyeso Wike. And one man cannot hold an entire state to ransom. So the president must have the courage and the conviction to call him to order and ask him to allow the incumbent governor to lead and to govern.
Well,
and then the incumbent governor will have to sit with his House of Assembly members and find accommodation. And hopefully, the elders in Rivers State will also join this conversation, and we will have peace in Rivers State.
Well, we'll be watching developments very closely. I want to thank you very much indeed for coming in and adding your voice to this very important discussion. Anthony Ubani is Executive Director of Fix Politics and spokesman of the more than 300 civil society groups that have come together to question the legality of President Tinubu's decision. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for having me.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, bye-bye and thank you for watching.